In 1935, Australia made a decision that would haunt it for generations. What started as a clever scientific solution soon spiraled into one of the greatest ecological disasters in modern history. Imagine a creature so small, yet so destructive, that it changed the landscape of an entire continent. A creature that multiplied uncontrollably, devoured everything in its path, and poisoned almost every animal that dared to eat it. This isn't a fictional horror movie. This is real life. This is the story of the cane toad, a pest sent to kill pests that ended up conquering Australia. If you're new to the channel, make sure to like this video and subscribe, because this story will leave you shocked at how one mistake can destroy an entire ecosystem. The beginning, Australia's bug problem. The early 1930s were a desperate time for Australia's sugarcane industry. The country's tropical north, especially Queensland, was thriving on the back of sugar production. But soon, a tiny enemy began to destroy this profitable dream. The culprit? The gray-backed cane beetle and the Frenchy beetle. These insects laid their eggs at the base of sugarcane stalks, and once the larvae hatched, they began feasting on the roots of the crops. Entire fields were being wiped out. Farmers were helpless, watching their livelihoods vanish overnight. Australia's sugarcane farmers were desperate for a solution. Pesticides were expensive and ineffective at that time. Crop rotation didn't work, and mechanical methods were too labor-intensive. That's when scientists turned to an idea that had worked elsewhere: biological control. If an animal could be found that naturally preyed on these beetles, perhaps it could save the industry. It sounded like science working hand in hand with nature. But no one realized the danger that was about to be unleashed. Enter the cane toad. The cane toad, scientifically known as Rhinella marina, is native to Central and South America. It's a large, bumpy-skinned amphibian that secretes potent toxins from glands behind its eyes. In its native regions, this poison keeps it safe from predators, and in those tropical ecosystems, its population remains balanced. But in 1935, Australian scientists thought this creature might be their hero. At the time, the Bureau of Sugar Experiment Stations decided to import 102 cane toads from Hawaii, where they had been previously introduced to combat similar beetle problems. The logic seems simple. Cane toads eat bugs, beetles are bugs. Problem solved. After all, what harm could a few frogs possibly do? The toads were bred in captivity, and soon thousands of them were ready to be released across Queensland's sugarcane fields. The farmers cheered, newspapers called it a scientific breakthrough, and the country was confident that its beetle problem was over. But the toads had their own plan. The first mistake. When the cane toads were released, they didn't go after the beetles as scientists had hoped. The beetles lived high on the sugarcane stalks, places cane toads couldn't reach. Instead, the toads feasted on everything else they could find: insects, worms, snails, small mammals, and even pet food left outside. They devoured anything that moved, anything that fit inside their mouths. At first, farmers thought it was a temporary adjustment, that maybe the toads would eventually learn to hunt the beetles. But days turned into weeks, and it became clear that the toads had no interest in the actual pests. They were thriving on the abundance of other life around them. The experiment had backfired spectacularly, not just in failure, but in chaos. What began as a few hundred toads released into the fields quickly turned into a biological explosion. The warm, humid Australian climate was perfect for them. There were no natural predators, plenty of food, and endless space to spread. By the time scientists realized their mistake, it was already too late. The toads began breeding, and once they started, nothing could stop them. Each female cane toad can lay up to 30,000 eggs at once, and they can do this several times a year. Their eggs, laid in long, glistening strands across ponds and ditches, hatched within days. Thousands of tadpoles filled every puddle and stream, dark clouds of movement that turned the water alive. Within a few short weeks, these tadpoles became tiny toads, each one ready to continue the unstoppable cycle. Within months, there were tens of thousands. Within years, there were millions. And these weren't ordinary toads. They were toxic, resilient, and relentless. Their thick, leathery skin protected them from dehydration. Their venomous glands made them deadly to most animals that tried to eat them. They could survive droughts, floods, and extreme temperatures. They learned to eat everything from ants to mice, adapting their diet and habits faster than anyone could imagine. It was as if the entire ecosystem had opened its doors to an invader that refused to leave. What scientists had introduced as a tool for control had instead unleashed a creature that could not be contained, a species that would rewrite the very rules of survival in Australia's fragile landscape. The spread of the toads. The cane toads began spreading rapidly. What started as a few scattered populations in the sugarcane fields soon turned into a wave of invasion that swept across Queensland. They moved beyond the farmlands that had once been their intended hunting ground, creeping into nearby forests, wetlands, and river systems, even reaching suburban backyards. At night, their croaks echoed like a chorus of warning, signaling that Australia was facing a silent invasion unlike anything before. They didn't just adapt, they thrived with terrifying efficiency. Their thick, rubbery skin made them resistant to dehydration, allowing them to survive in dry conditions that would kill most amphibians. Their potent poison made them nearly untouchable by predators. Any snake, bird, or mammal that tried to eat them was doomed to die within minutes. Their ferocious appetite meant they devoured almost anything that moved: insects, frogs, mice, even small reptiles, wiping out local food sources and starving native species. By the 1950s, the situation had grown out of control. Cane toads were no longer a local nuisance. They were a national crisis. They covered vast portions of Queensland in staggering numbers, turning once vibrant ecosystems into lifeless zones. They multiplied at a speed scientists could barely comprehend, migrating westward at a shocking pace, sometimes as much as 60 kilometers a year. Swarms of them moved like living floods, their slick bodies blanketing roads, farms, and waterways. At night, drivers crushed them by the hundreds, their corpses leaving slippery trails across highways. Scientists and officials scrambled to contain them, but every strategy failed miserably. Fences couldn't stop them. They simply dug under or climbed over. Traps captured a few, but thousands more appeared in their place. Poison bait was useless, as it often harmed native wildlife more than the toads themselves. Every attempt to fight back only revealed how unstoppable they had become. Australia had unleashed a biological invader that had no natural enemies and no limits. The ecosystem that had once seemed so resilient was crumbling under the pressure of a creature it was never meant to face. The irony was as cruel as it was devastating. The toad that was supposed to save Australia's crops was now consuming its wildlife, poisoning its predators, and rewriting the natural order of an entire continent. What had begun as a hopeful scientific experiment had turned into a nightmare of evolution and survival. A living reminder that nature, once disturbed, fights back in ways no one can predict. The toxic curse. One of the most dangerous aspects of the cane toad is its toxin. Behind each eye lies a gland filled with a milky substance known as bufotoxin. For most animals, it's deadly. Dogs, snakes, lizards, birds, and even crocodiles died after attempting to eat these toads. The poison attacks the heart, causing paralysis and death within minutes. Native predators, having never encountered such a creature before, didn't stand a chance. In northern Australia, entire populations of native species were wiped out. Goannas, quolls, and snakes died in massive numbers. Even crocodiles, apex predators that dominated the waterways, were found floating lifeless after trying to swallow these poisonous intruders. The ecological balance was collapsing, one species at a time. Farmers' nightmare. Farmers who had once welcomed the cane toads now hated them. The ground squirmed with thousands of toads at night. Their croaks filled the air, they clogged drains, contaminated water supplies, and invaded homes. They were everywhere, in sheds, in gardens, even in people's shoes. Australia was overrun. And the beetles? They were still there, unharmed and thriving. The Australian government began to realize the magnitude of the disaster. What had been introduced as a natural pest control had turned into one of the most invasive species in the world. People tried everything, hunting, poisoning, even running them over with vehicles. But the toads kept coming. The scientific failure. How could such a massive mistake happen? The answer lies in the arrogance of early 20th century science. At that time, ecological studies were limited. Scientists didn't understand how introducing a foreign species could devastate an ecosystem. They focused only on the immediate problem, the beetles, without considering the long-term consequences. When the cane toads failed to eat the beetles, the Bureau of Sugar Experiment Stations quietly stopped releasing them, but the damage was done. The initial release had already established a wild population that quickly exploded beyond control. By the time Australia tried to act, it was facing an unstoppable biological army. The invasion continues. Over the decades, cane toads spread across the continent like a slow-moving tsunami. By the 1980s, they had reached the Northern Territory. By the 2000s, they were approaching Western Australia. Their advance became a nightmare for environmentalists. Some scientists tracked their movements and noticed something alarming. The toads at the invasion front were evolving longer legs, allowing them to move faster and cover greater distances. Evolution itself seemed to be helping them spread. Native species were forced to adapt or die. Some predators learned to avoid the toads entirely. Others began evolving resistance to the toxins. But those changes were slow and limited. For many species, it was already too late. A continent under siege. Today, it's estimated that over 200 million cane toads inhabit Australia. They've conquered nearly every warm region of the continent. Their presence continues to devastate ecosystems. The sight of thousands of toads swarming roads at night is a chilling reminder of how one decision can spiral into disaster. The environmental cost is immeasurable. The poison they release seeps into waterways, affecting fish and aquatic life. The native insect population has drastically changed. Birds that once thrived on amphibians have vanished from certain areas. Even human communities suffer. Pets die from contact, and the stench of decaying toads fills the air after mass die-offs. The fight back. Despite the devastation, Australians haven't given up. Scientists have been working tirelessly to find solutions. Biological controls like specific viruses or bacteria that target cane toads have been explored, but none have been safely implemented. Genetic research has offered some hope. Scientists are studying ways to disrupt cane toad breeding patterns or make their offspring sterile. In some regions, community-led initiatives have taken charge. Volunteers go out at night to capture and remove cane toads by hand. Educational campaigns teach people how to distinguish native frogs from toads to avoid unnecessary harm. Yet, even with these efforts, the toads remain a dominant force. The global lesson. The story of the cane toad is not just an Australian tragedy, it's a warning to the entire world. Introducing foreign species into delicate ecosystems has repeatedly led to disaster. From rabbits in Australia to pythons in Florida. Nature is complex, and every species, no matter how small, plays a role. When humans interfere without understanding the balance, the results can be catastrophic. The cane toad became a symbol of human arrogance, a living reminder that nature cannot be controlled without consequences. What was meant to be a solution turned into a curse, one that Australia will likely never erase. Reflection. The irony of control. There's a bitter irony in the story of the cane toad. It was brought to Australia to destroy pests, but it became the pest itself. It was meant to save crops, yet it ended up poisoning rivers, killing wildlife, and rewriting entire food chains. What began as a simple scientific experiment turned into one of the most devastating environmental disasters in human history. The toad was supposed to represent the triumph of human intellect over the unpredictability of nature, a symbol of progress, innovation, and control. But instead, it became a reminder of our greatest humility, that humans are not above nature, but irrevocably bound to it, subject to its balance, and punished when that balance is disturbed. As the sun sets over Queensland, the haunting croak of thousands of toads echoes through the wetlands and fields, a living chorus of unintended consequences. Each croak tells a story not only of survival, but of warning, of how easily good intentions can spiral into ruin. The night air vibrates with their presence, an endless reminder that nature never forgets. And it always responds. The cane toad doesn't know it's a villain. It doesn't understand the chaos it caused. It is simply surviving, adapting, thriving, doing what evolution designed it to do. The real monster, as history painfully reveals, was never the toad itself, but the human hands that released it. The hands that believed they could control the wild without ever truly understanding it. The legacy of a mistake. Nearly a century later, the cane toad continues to define Australia's ecological narrative, a living scar on the continent's environment that refuses to fade. What began as 100 imported toads has transformed into an unstoppable biological empire stretching across millions of square kilometers. Scientists estimate their range still expands by about 50 kilometers every single year, pushing further into new territories and ecosystems. From the humid coasts of Queensland to the arid edges of Western Australia, these invaders adapt to every challenge thrown their way. They have evolved in remarkable ways. Longer legs for faster travel, stronger bodies for survival in harsher climates, and even behavioral changes that allow them to exploit new habitats that were once thought too extreme. In a strange twist of evolution, the cane toad has not only survived but thrived, shaping the land it once invaded into a domain built around its own resilience. Their toxin, once seen only as a curse, has even drawn the curiosity of modern science. Researchers have begun to study the chemical composition of their venom, discovering compounds that could potentially be used in pharmaceuticals, treatments for heart disease, pain management, and even certain neurological disorders. In laboratories across Australia, scientists extract the same deadly secretion that has killed countless native animals and study it for its hidden potential. It's a haunting irony. The very substance that devastated ecosystems might one day save human lives. Yet, despite these faint silver linings, the balance remains heavily tipped toward destruction. No amount of medical promise can undo the ecological chaos the cane toads have caused. The extinction of native predators, the collapse of food chains, and the permanent alteration of natural habitats. Future generations of Australians will inherit this legacy. They will grow up in a land forever shaped by a single decision made in 1935. A choice born from desperation and ignorance, but remembered as a warning etched into the country's history. For them, the cane toad will not just be a creature of biology, but a living symbol of human error. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson this story offers, that progress without foresight is not progress at all. Every choice humanity makes in the name of advancement must be guided by respect, not dominance, for the natural world. Because once nature is disrupted, no amount of science, technology, or regret can ever truly restore what has been lost. Conclusion. A warning echoed through time. The cane toad story is not just about Australia. It's about humanity. It's about the illusion of control, the arrogance of quick solutions, and the consequences of ignoring nature's warning signs. Every nation that faces invasive species today, from lionfish in the Atlantic to Asian carp in North America, carries the same burden of human error. But perhaps the most powerful thing about this story is that it forces us to look inward. The cane toad wasn't evil. It did what nature designed it to do. It was humans who acted without foresight. Humans who decided to play God. And nature, as always, responded. So the next time we think about fixing nature, we should remember the tale of the cane toad, the pest, sent to kill pests that ate everything instead. If you found this story shocking and eye-opening, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who still believes humans can outsmart nature. Because sometimes, the smallest creatures teach us the biggest lessons.